We have a really rock star panel lineup that we're really excited to get to share their thoughts and their experiences in the industry. And I know some of you guys are coming from Dr. Riddle's class earlier today, so then we'll be doing a screening after, so you can optional to stay for that. And like Lisa said, I graduated from GW in 2011. I've been in the apparel industry for most of my career, so it's an honor to get to share this with the panelists and with you guys tonight. This month is the Fashion Revolution month, but the specific Fashion Revolution week is April 23rd to the 29th, and that is the 5-year anniversary of Rana Plaza. So that was when the building in Bangladesh, the Rana Plaza, collapsed because of structural issues. So that was what spurred Fashion Revolution, and it's great timing for us to be having this conversation and to bringing awareness. And I just want to say a quick thank you to everyone who helped us put on this event. The GW-CIBER team, I don't know, I think they're working outside, but Alexis and Navina have been phenomenal, so thank you to them. Also, we have Divine Chocolate, if you guys have tried that, Fair Trade Chocolate. We have Liz Miller representing for them. And then we have Drink. They just showed up, and I see Kate out there. They have some awesome organic local juices, so feel free to try that. And we're also going to have a raffle after the screening. So it's a year's worth of chocolate.
Yes, it is.
Yes, a year's worth of chocolate. And the company I work for, Prana, donated a bag. It's yoga gear, yoga mat. So we have that as well. So if you signed in, you're eligible for that. And then let me see what else. And then, of course, last but not least, thank you to Liesl, because we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you. So thank you. And yeah, so let's give her a hand. I know, if you guys haven't already taken her class or don't know Liesl, you should, because she is a huge role model and has shaped what I do. So thank you. And then I was thinking, this is the very California West Coast in me coming out, is that I know you guys have been going through, you had spring break, going into finals and end of the semester. So I was thinking that we could all take a moment to close our eyes and do a little meditation series, if everyone's okay with that. Okay, so I just ask that you all close your eyes. And on the count of 3, we're going to take a deep breath in through our nose and out through our mouth. So we're going to, on the count of 1, 2, 3, in through our nose, out through your mouth. And then we'll do another one, in through your nose, out through your mouth. Okay, thank you. I just ask that you're present and you show the respect to the panelists who have taken their time to be here, for the peers in your audience, and most of all for the millions of people around the world who make our clothes that we're all wearing in this room today. And I just found a quote that I thought was impactful, which is that listening is such a simple act. It requires us to be present, and that takes practice, but we don't have to do anything else. We don't have to advise or coach or sound wise. We just have to be willing to sit there and listen. So thank you all for being here. All right, so we're going to skip to the agenda just to do a quick walkthrough so you guys can see that. So we started a little late. We're going to do this. We're going to have our panel. We're going to show you a quick clip. We didn't include Q&A, but we'll just see how things go. If you guys want, we can maybe factor that in. And then we'll have a quick break, and then we'll move to the screening. And then after, we'll do the raffle, and then any Q&A and meet and greet. And then, yeah, without further ado, we can play the clip if you're ready.
Well, I'm young enough that, I've kind of grown up in a world of fast fashion. And, some of the major brands and outlets have been a part of the way I buy clothing since I was a little kid. And I had never really stopped to think about where the clothes came from, or where they went after they were with me, or at all who was making them and how those people's lives were affected. And I'll never forget picking up the New York Times the day after the factory collapse in Rana Plaza, and seeing this image of this huge wall of missing person signs and these 2 boys walking by it, and reading this article about how, in our modern world, these people were making clothing for major Western brands that I knew and frequented all the time, and that was being crushed and burned alive, and that it wasn't the only incident, and that it was one of many, and that there was this whole story. So I think when I got into the subject, I didn't come from the background of fashion or design or any of those things, I just came into it and said, this is insane. Like, this is a crazy part of our world, and it's horrifying that I have never heard of it. Like, how did I live this long in my life without even considering something as basic as where my clothes came from? And for me, as I began to ask some of those very basic questions, like who made this, and where did they make it, and what's their life like, and is it better or is it worse because of it? And you know, it just began to open all these doors that led to making the film. Because I think what I found is that, you know, while I hadn't asked some of those questions, that there's really a lot of us that haven't asked some of those questions. And so the film is not a guilt trip, and it's not one of those like downer, you know, things that we've all seen before. It's really just an invitation to say, hey, there's something really important in the world that you've not considered. And you are a part of something integral just by buying clothes. And as simple as just opening our eyes and our hearts to this idea that there's hands, physical human hands that touch the things that we wear, and those hands are lives and they matter. I think that's what's really exciting. That's my hope for the film, is that we get to just kind of broaden this conversation, and we get to take what's been a very focused part of the industry, or what's been a very academic field of study, and say, hey, broadly in the real world, let's take seriously this idea that when we buy something, it is a moral act, and there are a chain reaction of consequences. So let's begin to be more mindful and choose things that actually support life and not take it away.
So we thought that would be a really good clip to start with, since we'll be showing the screening later. And with that, I was thinking we could get into the panel. So if you guys didn't grab one, we have bio sheets outside so you can read about where everyone's coming from. And I'll just do a quick run through so you guys know. So we have Joelle from Fashion Revolution. We have Liz from Divine Chocolate, Amy from Fair Trade USA, and Renee from Fair Labor Association. So thanks, ladies. So I wanted to start off, I thought what would be really interesting to talk about was that we all have these aha moments in this industry, whether we're like in a factory or we're just all of a sudden it dawns on us that this is much bigger than we thought it was. And I've shared with the class today, I had mine in Honduras, and so I thought it'd be really interesting to hear from you what your aha moment was, and when you realized that there was this massive industry and all of these moving components and with huge impact. Yeah, so if anyone wants to start.
I can dive in, or
we're all looking at you.
You're all looking at me, okay. I think like all of us, I have more than one aha moment. I'll share with you real quickly one that was early in my career and then one that was later in my career. Early in my career, I was a fair trade buyer for 10,000 Villages, which is a fair trade company here in the U.S. I was working in India, mostly with artisan cooperatives. And before I even had my first day on the job, I was sent to India to work with a producer group, an artisan group. And I got to India, and I, went on the train 5-6 hours, and I got off the train. This particular producer group was making textiles, weaving, and it was is actually a community group specifically for people with leprosy or whose families were affected by leprosy, which in India, particularly in villages, often means that you don't have access to jobs. And so I got off the train, and I went and I met very small, maybe 35 to 40 weavers. They sat me down, and they said, great, thanks for coming. You are our only buyer, and our products aren't selling anymore, and we have 2 weeks to fix it, or we won't be able to send our kids to school. And that was not a play at my emotions. That was not a sob story. That was the reality of the situation. So that was a huge aha moment. I spent 2 weeks there. I spent the next 5 years working with them, trying to find a product that would sell. And we eventually did. So you'll hear a lot of talk in the film tonight about fast fashion. This was very, very, very slow fashion that, frankly, wouldn't be workable for much of the industry. But in this case, we spent 5 years investing in this particular artisan group. Did find something that would sell. It ended up being a woven headband. And sold for quite a while. So that was my first aha moment. But I think the way that translates to what, Brianna, you just asked, like, when was the moment you realized this was bigger than you ever thought? Those 35, 40 women who were depending on me in that situation for their jobs are the same as the factory workers you'll see. Everything that we wear is touched by human hands. And I don't think that's my quote. I think that's actually from the movie. And so, just recently, actually not too long ago, I was in a factory in El Salvador. And I think sometimes in our minds, even those of us in the industry, we think of factories as being really mechanized. They're not. It is women, mostly women, at sewing machines. And the women at the sewing machines are relying on those jobs for core income the same way that those 35 weavers were relying on those jobs for core income. So I think for me, maybe there's, in between those two experiences, there have been like a million aha moments, but those are the two that kind of stick out.
That's great. I'm going to piggyback off that because I think one of the many aha moments that I've had is at Fairtrade USA, which is where I work. We certify many different product categories, so chocolate, coffee, tea, sugar, and apparel, footwear. And sometimes when you think about agriculture, you think the same thing, like, oh, there's this big machine that's kind of harvesting all the cotton, which happens in the US but does not happen in other countries. And some products the way that they are grown can't be mechanized. So coffee cherries actually ripen at different rates. So they have to be hand-picked because you have to pick them at a specific ripeness. And maybe someday there'll be some technology that can like detect the ripeness and zap it off or something, but we're not there yet. And so I think one of the aha moments for me was like everything that you touch and eat and wear is made by, for the majority, people. So furniture, your bed frame, there's just an insane amount of things that you touch and use every day that are made by people around the world. And I think when I started at Fairtrade and we looked at manufactured goods, which is where I work, but also seafood we work in, and agriculture, there are just a lot of people around the world that depend on their jobs like we do. And so making sure that those supply chains and everybody's job along that supply chain is a good one is an interesting space to be working in.
Awesome. Hi, I'm Liz. Raise your hand if you've ever held a chocolate bar in your hand. Oh, good, most of you. Awesome. Raise your hand if you've ever held a cocoa pod in your hand. All right. Quick story. About 10 years ago, I was in Ghana. I was on a study abroad trip there with my school. I was an undergrad. And I was traveling along, and we stopped for a break on the side of the road, met a cocoa farmer who came up to our group and said, have you guys ever held a cocoa pod in your hand? Do you guys know what this looks like? Everyone on the bus was like, no. None of us ever knew where chocolate came from. Yes, 20 years old, didn't know, had never really thought about it. It's all good. And I think that moment was sort of the start of a series of aha moments where you're actually holding this product in your hand that you had absolutely no connection to, even though it was a part of one of your absolute favorite treats every single day. So I think my aha moment was, one, understanding that cocoa is grown on a tree, and the way you get it off the tree is by being a farmer and participating in the trade in that way. And I think the second aha moment is realizing I never guessed that I would be 10 years later working for a chocolate company. This actually blows my mind sometimes. So I think in between all of that, understanding the fact that the global chocolate industry is valued at about $100 billion. Yes, I said $100 billion. That's what chocolate provides to this world. And lots of big companies make most of that. Compared with the average amount of money that a cocoa farmer makes per year, which is about $300. So when you're thinking about how do you actually understand the cocoa farmer's role in this billion-dollar industry, that's something that I'm learning every day and trying to inspire and help facilitate understanding among everyone else as well. So I think really getting to know the context of what is the industry that I'm in and who are the people involved and who is actually getting the most benefit from this huge industry that actually, when you think about it, now this could be contested, nobody really needs a chocolate bar compared to wheat or other things, water. But I think at the end of the day, you think this is a luxury good that all of us enjoy every day. Most of us in this room can go to the store and purchase one. But in the end, we're really dependent on farmers who make very little money so that we can all enjoy this good. So I spend every single day of my working life advocating for those farmers and really trying to make sure that they have a voice, they're being compensated well, and they are a part of this business that we cherish every day.
Thank you.
So yes, I have many aha moments. I've been working in the fashion industry for 10 years, and I did start in the industry as a journalist and a stylist. And then I traveled to Vietnam to do some research on textile, and this is where I discovered the factories. But my biggest surprise was outside of Hanoi, in 2 hours outside of Hanoi, there is a village called the Textile Village, and it's actually a second-hand market for garments. And you get there, and it's a strip, a road where there is mountains and mountains of second-hand garments. And you get there, and they ask you kindly to take off your shoes, and they give you a bag. And so you take off your shoes, and you start climbing this mountain of garment. And I do have the chills by just talking about it. And basically, those garments are our own, second-hand donations. And this was, for me, was just a big shock because I do donate my clothes to organizations. And then I see, just a T-shirt with a Coca-Cola, any kind of T-shirt that you would buy here, and they sell it by the pound or the kilo. And that was just a huge. There was a huge moment in my head where, okay, the textile industry in Vietnam is huge. They also produce cotton, and here we are just throwing away those, tons of garments. So yeah, that's. I ended up staying there for 4 years, working with local Hmong people in the north of Vietnam. Learning a lot about sustainability. That's how, for me, everything started. So yeah, that's my big aha moment.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. I appreciate sharing that. So I was thinking that we could move into just kind of discussing the apparel industry, and I think it's interesting because we are all coming from it from different perspectives and different moments in time. But right now we're facing fast fashion and just this need for speed in our garments. So what do you, in your opinion, for the areas that you're working in, what do you consider is the most pressing challenge for yourself and for your organization that you're like, we have to focus on this? Because this is what's making me not sleep at night.
Okay, I can start.
Yeah.
So for fashion, I think the most pressing issue is transparency. because when you talk about transparency, you have the human factor, the environmental factor, and the economical factor. And for Fashion Revolution, what transparency means is basically public disclose of brands' goals, regulation, procedure, processes, but also the impact that transparency can have or has on the workers, on communities, and on the environment. So from transparency, this is like, I think, the most pressing issue. The other one that I would like to mention is the issue of this post-consumer waste that I was talking about. That is something that today is very, very, very difficult to regulate. First of all, because we cannot recycle every piece of clothes that we wear, because we are wearing hybrid textile, and we haven't found the technology yet to recycle hybrid textile. And second of all, because we donate, and yes, because there are not a lot of options today, so we do donate, but please know that 15% only of your donation are being sold in the markets here. The rest is sent abroad to Vietnam, Cambodia, Kenya, and it's killing their local markets. So yeah, that's pressing issues. And then we have tons of other issues.
You only picked two.
Yeah.
I can't speak to apparel, but I can talk about cocoa.
I guess I should preface and say that. So Liz is on the panel because there's so many crossovers between food and, is that me echoing? There's so many crossovers between food and fashion, and so that's why we wanted to be able to provide your input. And I think food is probably 10 to 20 years ahead of apparel in terms of customer awareness and education. So there's so much we can learn from the food sector. So that's the connection there.
Awesome. Thank you. So I think that some of the major pressing issues in the cocoa sector, there are two that I talk about a lot. The first one is simply farmer income. And this is exactly how it sounds. So the amount of money that farmers are paid for the sale of their beans. Oftentimes, as I mentioned before, farmers only are able to have one stream of income, and that's exactly what they get from selling what they grow. One of the things about Divine that I'll mention and why I'm here is Divine is a company that is focused on farmer inclusiveness and delivering more than just one stream of income. So our business model is set up that we deliver four. So not only do they get a fair trade minimum price for the sale of their beans, but they also get a fair trade premium, which is sort of like a bonus on top of that. In addition to that, the thing that really sets Divine apart from any other chocolate company is that we are co-owned by the cocoa farmers who grow the cocoa for our products. So this means that they get a stream of income based on dividends, 44% of our company. And then finally, to add on to the mix, we support farmer development and projects through a producer support and development fund. So 2% of our annual revenue is put right back into the infrastructure of the cooperative that co-owns Divine. And this way, they're able to really benefit not just from fair trade, which is a very important part of our business model, but even go beyond fair trade. So having those two added streams of income can really support not just individual farmers, but that money can go into community projects that they can all vote on and decide what they want to do with. So farmer income is number one. And related to that is number two, which is attracting the next generation of cocoa farmers. So can anyone here guess what might be the average age of a cocoa farmer in Ghana? Anyone? Yeah.
50.
Anyone else? Yeah. She got it. The average age of a cocoa farmer in Ghana is 55 years old. So this means that you can understand, as time progresses, those farmers are going to age out of the profession. So how are we going to replace those farmers with the next generation if this is not a viable way to earn money? So one of the ways that we're trying to do that through Divine is by increasing the amount of income, making this a more viable and sustainable option for them.
Thanks. Oh, I got this one, but I'll pass it this way. I got the special mic. I would say the two most pressing challenges that I think we face are consumers and investors. We were talking a little bit about this ahead of time. No matter what companies would like to do to improve their supply chains, to pay their workers living wage, to make the products out of the most green materials and all organic, if consumers aren't willing to pay for that product because it will inevitably be more expensive, then they're not going to be able to sell it, and then they won't be a business. So they make products based on all of the consumer insights that they receive from their website, from purchasing point of sale, and they make products based on what consumers are asking for. On the other side as well, they think about pricing and what price point consumers are willing to pay for the products, and then work backwards. They need to make sure that they make enough margin to make enough money to show returns to their investors quarterly, especially if they're a public company. If they're a private company, not so much, but there's pressures on both sides to, one, set prices at a point where consumers will be willing to pay for them, and then two, make enough money that they can show quarterly returns to their investors. And so between those two things, it makes it very difficult for them to make products that contain all of these attributes that we want, because if we're not willing to pay for it, then they're not going to make it. So that's one of the reasons why I'm at Fair Trade, because I think we need, as a consumer movement, as a fair trade movement, as a sustainability movement, to figure out how we can show that doing right by your supply chain and by your business is also good for your business. Otherwise, companies will not be able to make those choices.
Yes, all of those things. Yeah, just to sort of support some of the things my fellow panelists have been saying, you all have just touched on a whole bunch of different groups, right? Consumers, investors. We've spoken about the importance of fair compensation, which is something I work on quite a bit at the Fair Labor Association. And maybe to tie some of those things together, I think for the Fair Labor Association and for the brands that we partner with, we are really working to take a holistic approach. And I should say we don't just partner with brands, we partner with universities, we partner with civil society. 20 years ago, corporate social responsibility was all about what's happening at the factory level and what do we do about it. And I think as time has evolved, what we've discovered and what we all are coming to know and what brands are coming to understand is that what's happening at the factory level really is directly impacted by the commitment at the company level. And not just commitment, but practices. So, to tag on to what Amy was saying, we can talk all we want about paying workers, or as Liz was saying, paying farmers a fair wage. But unless buyers, to just give one example, are rewarded in their own job descriptions and in their own annual performance reviews for supporting worker wages versus just getting the best price for the best product, we're not going to get there. So one of the things we work on very hard at the Fair Labor Association with our brands is how to integrate those practices at the corporate level and then also into the supply chain at the factory level. And I think as we all, as an industry, learn to do that, then we really do begin to make progress on some of the very compelling issues that you'll see in the movie here in just a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Thanks so much, everyone. I think, it was great to hit all the different pressing issues that we're all facing in our own space. So something that came up in the class today that I thought would be good, and it's kind of not a curveball, but it's a little bit of a tough one, was just talking about, okay, if we make the most sustainable product and socially and environmentally, how do you make it accessible for everyone? And how do you sell it in a competitive way? And especially knowing that so many brands, there's no little regulation, so it's all voluntary. So how do you compete against that? And I know I deal with this all the time, so I'm saying this because I don't know, but I'm just throwing it out there because I think that's what everyone, how can we serve everybody to be able to shop ethically? Anyone?
I'll start at this end this time, and I'll just speak very briefly. I think we talked about aha moments before. And I think maybe, Brianna, to answer that question, for me, we need to get beyond the assumption that sometimes happens at the consumer level that more expensive means more ethical. Mm-hmm. I don't actually know that that's always the case. Mm-hmm. In fact, it might rarely be the case. And I think sometimes we default to that because it's an easy, and it's an easy way to think about things. But the more expensive end price does not always mean that workers, for example, are being paid a fair wage. Yeah. So I think, within FLA, we have T-shirt manufacturers that are accredited. Gildan is accredited. Their corporate social responsibility practices have been vetted with us, and those products are certainly they're certainly not luxury products. Mm-hmm. So I think there are things that, as consumers, there's plenty of brands out there that we can support that are quite accessible.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that we think a lot about at Fair Trade is, obviously Fair Trade certification. And so trying to find ways to your point, I guess, piggybacking off again, to elevate and celebrate the brands that are trying to do it the right way. And one of the ways that there are out there are multiple ways, but one of the ways is Fair Trade certification, being a part of the Fair Trade movement, having a portion of your products Fair Trade certified, or some other certification or some other program that you're doing to really try to improve the lives of your workers, improve the sustainability of the materials in your products. And so how do we, both as a Fair Trade movement and as a larger sustainability movement, elevate and celebrate the brands that are trying to do the right thing? I think historically we've done a lot of, or there has been a lot of pressure and kind of criticism movements out there, which also work to a certain extent. But it only gets us so far, and so can we flip it and also add on more movements to elevate and celebrate the brands that are doing the right thing?
Yeah, this is a tough one. I think one thing that I come across a lot in my work is that people believe that if you are Fair Trade certified, then you have to trade down on quality. And so one of the major things that Divine is often trying to communicate is you can have a high-quality, delicious, all-natural product that is comparable and better than other products that are in the premium chocolate aisle. And there's a consumer perception that just because you're Fair Trade means that, you must have had to do something to make your product end up not being as great. But I think we should continue to push for, you can have both. You can have really great products, whether it's really well-made apparel or really delicious tasting chocolate, and you can have a business model that supports the producers and people involved in the supply chain. So I think that that's something consumers should understand and should know. And further to that point, it is about consumers demanding from the companies themselves to be better. Because at the end of the day, I think it's a combination of consumers have to be aware and understand what's going on, but also companies respond to consumer demand. So if you're describing your needs as saying we need high quality products that are also more fair to the workers involved, then eventually there's going to hopefully reach a tipping point where the companies are responding to that demand and really forced to meet the needs and make things more accessible to consumers because that's what they're asking for. So.
And to add on this misconception that fashion that is organic or fair trade is more expensive, a lot of people tell me also it's very crunchy granola. And I think that it's, this is an absolutely, this is false right now. And so there is an issue with information and knowledge that I think that we can, that needs to be tackled also. And I believe that the consumers are shifting, that today millennials are looking for much more sustainable product, and it's just a question of showing that you can actually buy ethical, and I'm talking about fashion mostly because that's what I do, and buy local and buy fair trade. You don't need to spend so much money, and you can also be stylish and trendy and cool. It doesn't mean that you will look like so I think there is also a big issue with open sources and information sharing. And the research. And actually, Fashion Revolution has an amazing resource page on their website, and they answer all those questions. So, yeah.
Thanks, guys. So I was thinking we could maybe, I think, Amy, this one might be just for you. So I know, watch out. So REI launched this week that they're having product sustainability guidelines for all the brands that sell into their stores. So this is like one of the biggest things that we've seen happen in a long time, where like the retail store is saying, like, I literally will not sell your stuff unless it meets my sustainability standards. And those go in place 2020. So that's 300 plus brands that are now going to be required to meet fair trade, organic, different certifications. So what were your thoughts on that announcement this week?
So I think it's great. I actually surveyed around the office to see if we knew any other retailers that had similar things, and we didn't do an extensive research, so there may be some out there, but none came up to mind that have similar standards set. And just to be clear about the way they work, because I think it's super interesting, so they have a list of foundational requirements that you must adhere to in order to be able to be sold in the store. And then there's preferred attributes that you can do to go kind of above and beyond. And so in the world of social responsibility, just to give you an example, a foundational requirement, the foundational requirement is to have a code of conduct that lists out all of the major requirements you have around working conditions and pay and benefits for the workers in your supply chain, and then have a way to monitor that. And then a preferred attribute for the social space is fair trade. So it's not requiring that you do fair trade, but you must, as a requirement, have a code of conduct, have some requirements, and make sure that your supply chain is abiding by those. But then if you want to go above and beyond, you can do fair trade. Similarly, in chemicals, they have some foundational requirements, and then you can do Blue Sign, which is a certification around sustainable chemical use in your supply chain. So I think it's great. I'm super excited to see it move forward. I think there's a lot of brands that they sell that already are doing these things, and then there's some that I think are going to be nudged by this. And I am hopeful that other retailers will also see this, see the success that it has, and move forward in a similar fashion.
Yeah. Does anyone else want to comment on that, or no?
I mean, I'll just tag on quickly. I think what we see is that when retailers start to get involved in that level, and I think more will, if they're not already, we're certainly seeing more interest at FLA from retailers. That's where the rubber hits the road, and that's where the opportunity falls for all of us in the room to support those retailers in their efforts. Mm-hmm. And I think that's when I think about my personal actions around my buying habits, my personal goal is always to buy more mindfully, right? Like to think about who I'm buying from, and I think that's the perfect case study. If retailers start to support REI, or excuse me, if consumers start to support retailers like REI or like others, then it will grow, and it will become also an easier way for us all to be more mindful about what we're buying.
Yeah. Just to be clear as well, there are a lot of retailers do have sustainability programs, and they do have things that they are looking at, but to the extent that they have a full standard and that it's going to be audited, and that if you aren't meeting it, you are not going to be sold in the store, I think is the new level that REI has taken that. So I think my first comment might have been a little confusing, so just clarifying.
I also think, to add on that as consumers, it's very simple to think about a T-shirt. How can a T-shirt cost $5? And this journey of the T-shirt. So also just be mindful of that, and just think about the journey of a T-shirt from the cotton farmer to the hand weaver, to the spinner, to the dyer, to the person that is going to sew it, to the packaging, to the travel. So it doesn't make sense that something be as cheap as that. And so yeah, just keep in mind all of that and just be mindful of that.
Yeah.
That also applies to chocolate, I would say. And furthermore, as a former college student with limited finances, I understand that it is challenging to sometimes commit to paying more for products, especially, apparel or even a chocolate bar. So I would recommend at least starting small and making small commitments over time. Even if it's just saying, this month, maybe I usually buy 2 chocolate bars. One of them I'll make sure to buy a fair trade one. So over time, you can start to gradually change your habits. Because I do understand it's hard to go from, okay, I have no money or very little money, to I'm going to buy everything sustainable, all ethical, all the time. I don't think any of us in the room can say that we do that 100% of the time. And it's important to be realistic about what you're actually doing. And I think at least small steps from the beginning can really start to change your own lifestyle towards something better in the end.
Thanks, guys. I know we're running a little bit behind, so I'm going to just throw out one last question, and then we'll move into the break, and then we'll have the Q&A after for everyone. So I was thinking to throw out, what is something that you'd like to share and let the audience know before watching the film? And then a bonus would be, what's a sustainable product are you most excited about that's out on the market or that's coming out?
Would you like to share?
Yeah, anything you think anyone should know before watching the film, just to have food for thought when they're watching it? And then is there anything out on the market or coming out that you're personally excited about? So you don't have to do both, but I just throw it out.
So I guess as you're watching the film, or just in your general lives, I think this is a sort of a call to action too. As a marketing manager, it is my dream that everyone talks about fair trade products in general, specifically Divine. And I think part of our responsibility as consumers is how do we spread the word to other people about the choices that we're individually making? Because word of mouth is really the strongest form of marketing there is. So you might not think, one little thing that you do is going to make a huge difference. But for companies like Divine, small social enterprises like ours, just having a few people post about something that they're enjoying, the reason why they're enjoying it, why it aligns with their values, that can actually make a huge difference in getting the message across. Divine has been around for 20 years, and it's really only because of advocates and people who have been talking about fair trade and, frankly, loving chocolate for a long time, that we've really been able to succeed with this business model that's been so radically different. So I'd encourage you to think about the ways that you communicate every single day with the people in your networks and say, even if it's just one time or occasionally, it's those points of communication that can really add up.
The fashion industry is the second most polluting industry in the world, if you didn't know that. So that's something that I think everyone should know. It's the third most powerful industry in the world after automotive and the electronics. And it's 75 million workers, 80% of which are women between the age of 18 and 35. So please keep that in mind while watching this amazing documentary, because I think those are those are things that we don't really talk about when we go shopping or when we turn the pages of the magazines or we look at the latest trends. Something I'm excited about?
Yeah.
I think DC is very much evolving fashion-wise, and I'm excited to see a lot of local brands coming to DC or local designers. I went to visit the fashion incubator, the DC fashion incubator here, and I was very, very surprised to see how they were all asking me about sustainability and where do you think we can buy, how do we look at the fibers. So yeah, I'm quite excited that the scene in DC is coming, which is great.
One of the things that I would encourage when watching the film, and they talk about it, but really kind of thinking about it as you're watching it, is that this system, so I've talked a little bit about it tonight, of investors, consumers, the brand, the factory, and kind of the incentive structures that they all have. So the film does a really good job of telling you compelling stories and talking about the industry. And so I would encourage you to watch it with the lens of those stories and how all of those people interact with each other and their individual incentives in their life to feed their families, and how those decisions may affect the other people in the system. And I think we talked about it a little bit as well. If your job description says that you need to hit a certain margin and that is in your livelihood for your family depends on that, you're going to make certain decisions. It's not because you don't care about the people in the supply chain or you don't care about what happens, but your job and your family and their livelihood depends on it. So I think thinking about that and thinking about that as you watch the film is an interesting lens to watch it through. So I'm excited about some new products that are coming down to be fair trade certified, but I'm not allowed to speak about them. So I would just encourage you to go to the fairtradecertified.org website over the year, and there'll be new brands and new product launches that are new products for us, and new things that you can have in your home or use that are fair trade certified.
I think something that I would encourage you all to think about as you watch the film, and I just watched this film again the other night, and I have been thinking about it myself a lot from a very personal level. Fashion is a global industry, and I think we all need to actively fight against the notion of it's other people in other places making clothes. Those statements for us might be true, but the key there is that these are people making the clothes that we are wearing. And I worry that as fashion becomes more global and is almost entirely overseas now for us in the US, that it's way too easy for all of us to think of the producers and the workers as other people who are out of sight and out of mind. So that's what I hold very close when I watch the film, and I think that it's something worth thinking about.
Anything you're excited for in particular?
I think I would say, so I have I have twins who are 12 years old. I can tell you what they're excited about. We're seeing a lot of very interesting companies come into sustainability, particularly like sports board companies, skateboard companies. We just accredited Volcom, for example, which is a really cool brand. So I think we're also starting to see some new sectors of the apparel industry come on board that, again, it's really cool to see my 12-year-olds excited about a brand being sustainable. So I think that's it's a good trend.
Yep, that's awesome. Thanks so much. Oh.
Fashion Revolution this year.
Yeah. Please add. Yeah.
Can I share that?
Yeah. Oh.
One thing I'm excited about is that a lot more women are coming into the fold to own their own businesses and start their own companies. And I think that it's really important to support those women, invest in them. I think we really need more representative leadership across all fronts, gender and race especially. So I'm really excited to see that. Woo!
I just forgot to share something that I've been working on with Fashion Revolution. So we're bringing Fashion Revolution Week to DC. So next week, starting on the 24th, we're doing screening, panel talk, open studio, retail, scrap therapy. So I don't know, I can share it with you and then you can share with everyone. So we're just raising awareness and bringing all of that to DC, which is, again, just fantastic to see that happening here.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone. I appreciate it. Thank you for coming. You guys can give a round of applause. Yeah. And we're going to take a break. So we're going to start the movie probably in like 10 minutes. And then we'll be around after for meet and greet Q&A. So thanks, guys.